Well, thank you for joining me, Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. I wanted to speak on the subject of single mothers and the hostility of their children. Now, life doesn't work out the way that we always wanted it to, and we end up with people that we're probably not equipped to be in relationships with. When you engage a relationship with a single mother, you're going into a totally exclusive realm. Why isn't that focusing? What's the problem with that? A totally exclusive realm. A realm that has been formed domestically, emotionally, and physically. It's an environment that will have dynamics that you have probably never experienced or seen before going on between the people in it. There'll be dysfunction that you don't understand. You'll be misunderstood. There'll be dishonesty. There'll be denial. There'll be foolishness. It will be unwieldy, spiteful. It'll be poisonous, intolerant. It'll be hostile, guarded and distant. Behind your back, there'll be cynicalism and criticalness. They'll be arrogant. There's multitudes of ways in which this will confront you. Now, it can become oppressive, negative, and most of all, immature. It will be grim. You'll become a villain. There might even be threatening. I can remember a kid once, in a threatening way, said, "You were rude to my mother," but all I did was challenge his interference, and he didn't like that at all. And I didn't even say a word. All I did was leave. I got up and left. And his conscience was shown that you won't waste my time. When you take on a woman that has children to multiple fathers in some cases, you have to ask yourself, why? Why would you do that? And the reason for this is you will not be able to change or save or help these people. It's just going to be your turn. It's just going to be your moment with that person, because at some stage you are going to end up to be no different than those that have gone before you. Now, some single mothers like to be treated badly. They like to have drama and dysfunction, because for most of them that's all they're used to. If they've been in a relationship with an alcoholic, dysfunctional, narcissist, selfish person, greedy, guarded, indifferent, irresponsible type of person who's managed just to put food on the table and that's all, has remained an alcoholic or a drug addict and got nothing to show for any of it, because the substance has become the primary need. When you ask yourself, why are you there? What would be your answer? Because you cannot recover from the other side of one of these relationships unless you fully understand what you were trying to accomplish. When the children of these people are allowed to indirectly interfere in your relationship, and you get wind of this, the only advice that I can give you that's going to help you without being pessimistic is you have to leave. Because it's not going to change. It's the way that these people are formed. Now, I'm not being cynical or grim, but this is what you're going to have to do, because ultimately where these dysfunctional enmeshments are formed, you essentially are going to be in a position that is outside the circle. You're like a reserve on a football team. You'll be called in when needed and put back on the bench when you're not, while these people go on with their family dynamic. Now, everything usually always starts off good at first. That's the blind side of the situation. That's where you get blindsided. That's where your guard can, not always, but can go down. And this is where you will become enmeshed, because they need you to be enmeshed. Once they've got you enmeshed, and they're sure about that, then things will change. Now, the woman might actually like you and be doing her best to play her part in the relationship. It will be limited, depending on her value of you. But in the background are the monsters. In the background is the enemy. And it's a horrible thing to say about children, isn't it? But this is how it is. It's very rare, unless the children are very young when you come along, that there will be respect. I was raised by a Scotsman who came along when I was 7 years old, and I can honestly say I never fully had the respect that he deserved, because I knew he wasn't my father. So I know how the dynamics of all of this works. I know the hostility and intolerance of the children, the rudeness of these children towards the partner of the parent. Now, what came to me last night as I was pondering all of this, and I've got a lot to ponder about at the moment in my personal life, is the way in which, and the desperate, destructive determination, particularly of young adult men and young teenage to adult daughters, in which they go about saving their environment, particularly if the mother's the supplier, the primary supplier, is lethal. And I mean lethal in its literal term. You'll be made to feel worthless. You'll be made to feel unhappy. You'll feel oppressed, negative, and hateful. You'll want to speak up, but you'll want to not have a fight because you don't want to bring sadness. When you start to deal with the issues, they'll make out possibly that you're being creepy or cold or annoying. the children will make you feel unwelcome. And as a matter of fact, you might even think that the situation's becoming scary and unfair and offensive, because these are all the things that you're going to experience from these children. You're going to be hard-hearted. You're going to feel ignored. You'll be injured. It'll be noxious for you. It'll even be insidious. The parent that you're with will probably play ignorant. That's what a parent does with their children. They go into ignorance to try and protect them. Not very many parents will discipline their children for a partner because they know that the partner could go, but the children will stay, only to find out that the children go as well, and they end up on their own in a relationship that they're unhappy with. It can be sinister, rude, painful, questionable. And the parent will play naivety on you because they won't want to deal with the issue. You'll be accused of being jealous of children and their relationship with their mother. And check yourself if you are. I've never felt that, but I've been accused of that. I think it's more of a cop-out than solving anything. You'll feel icky. You might even feel haggard if you're a woman and you're in a relationship with one of these men and they're in covert emotional incest with their daughter. You'll end up enraged, damaged. You'll find it to be abysmal. You'll definitely end up anxious. And the whole situation is going to be hostile. Just hostile. When you watch these young men deteriorate, behavior deteriorate to infantile levels because you're with their mother or trying to offer a relationship with the mother. You look back where I'm sitting now and you go, well, the mother had 2 boys to 2 different men. She hadn't made the right decisions. She was a good worker, but I'm not sure where all the money was going. She didn't really have much to show for herself, and whatever her excuses for that were, are none of my business, because I didn't judge her on what she didn't have or what she did have. I think I was judged because of the insecurity it brought to her sons on my mental, physical, intellectual and spiritual level, on my financial level. None of that was going to be appreciated because it made them look out of order and weak. But that was their problem, not mine. The mother, in this case, was like Alice out of the Brady Bunch. She was the dinner provider. I'm sure she was the financial provider. She'd become very masculine. She had a way of being submissive, but she was very masculine. And she was the wife of her sons. Now, the problem with that was she was never going to be of any good to me because she was too codependent on her sons. Now, this was somebody that said codependence was something to be avoided. Yet she was so enmeshed, so deeply enmeshed with those boys, that I don't even think she really knew what codependence was, because the codependence state that she was in, she couldn't have been codependent with anyone else because there was nothing left for anybody else. And when you start to realize and see these things, it's quite easy to become resentful and bitter towards that person, because now you're on guard. You're noticing that something's wrong. You have the intelligence and knowledge to know that it's covert emotional incest. You're enmeshed as well. You're thinking that you're becoming part of the group, but you're actually not. You haven't got a chance. And when you've got young, dysfunctional men running their mother's life, you are really going to end up in trouble. And that's how it plays out. You have to expect that this is how it's going to play out. You have to look at what you're dealing with. You have to believe that what you're seeing is true. You cannot be in a denial state. And when these things start to get exposed, you'll see a change in her. And that change will begin with an apology. But if she's not convinced that her apology has worked, then she'll begin to withdraw. There'll be less text messages. She won't answer her phone. She'll turn up when she's made the commitments. Then the children will start to interfere with the commitments, and it just gets very ugly and very messy, very thoughtless, very unemotional, and very robotic. And trust, my trust, started to go. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 3 says, "The integrity of the upright will guide them, but the perversity of the unfaithful will destroy them." There's two different paths that people can go down. The upright will maintain their integrity and be guided through wisdom and into life. But the unfaithful, in this course of this topic, I would presume to be able to say that the people that aren't following through with their commitments, right, the perversity of the unfaithful will destroy them. And I can tell you, and I'm sure there's a lot of single mothers that we're starting to see through social media who have thought that they could live in a way in which a moral woman who has stayed with the man that brought her children in the world could live. But it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't, life will not play out that way for them, because their perversity leads them down the wrong paths of decisions. They make wrong decisions, and they continue to make wrong decisions. And they hold on to these decisions, and they hold on to these negative, destructive beliefs. They defend their horrible decisions. They defend their horrible behavior. They go stubborn. They won't speak. They end up haggard and frail and despicable and damaged and corrosive. For what? For the lust that's inside them, that's deceiving them to make these destructive decisions where they always end up without a partner. Now, I can't say they end up alone. And this was something that came to me last night, because a single mother has children, and that protects her from being alone. And she conditions herself covertly, emotionally, incestually, into making these children her source of company, or his source of company. Therefore, the value of the partner never escalates, because they have the security of the children, ultimately to protect them from the things that would otherwise cause damage to somebody that wanted company. So these people, they will not fully put themselves into your life, because they've already got their life set up. they know that it works, and they know that they won't be let down. If you're the sole provider, you'll know that you've got them manipulated in a way in which they'll need you as well. They need you because you've formed them into being reliant on you. That's what these covert emotionally incestual people do. They set up the situation where the dependents are actually dependent. Even if they're working, they're still dependent. And this is how the parent can imprison, as it were, psychologically imprison, through a need of dependence for the mother, to be in a position where the mother will never be left abandoned or jettisoned, which is now her core source of security. So if you come into that environment, you are not going to ever be her source of security, because her children are, which means that she is not alone. She's not single. She's emotionally attached to her children. This is where we miss it. She's not sitting there lonely. She just has needs, instinctual needs that come up that she'd like to have met. So you've got to ask yourself, am I willing to play Russian roulette with my life and be with one of these people? Now, I'm not saying they're not loving and all this sort of stuff. No, I'm talking about commitments and where they're going to position themselves relative to your needs. These are the dangers, because once the dysfunction starts, you're going to end up on the end of it because you're outside the circle. So you need to be very careful and aware what you're doing when you go into a relationship with somebody that hasn't got your children. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. Bye for now.